Alexandria. We were there for a short time, and then put on board a boat that was going across to Greece. We crossed the Mediterranean, landed at Piraeus, and we made camp in a suburb of Athens called Voula, or Voulos. There's a big town called Voulos further north, but this had the same name. And then this was in April by this time.
What year was that?
Oh, good heavens. Well, I was called up 1940. No, this is 1941. That's right. And in fact, 3 or 4 of us went swimming in the sea there, enjoying ourselves that we were actually swimming in the Aegean. And a couple of Greeks came rowing past, and they'd been fishing. And they were very friendly, big smiles on their faces. Nobody could understand a word that they said, and they couldn't understand us, but they'd evidently been fishing, and they held up what they'd caught to show us. And it was an octopus about 1 yard across. And the next thing was that we were all sitting back on the bank again. Nobody had said a word, but we'd all made for getting out of the water. Anyway.
Did the octopus frighten you?
Yes, the prospect of bumping into one of those. I mean, it wasn't a big one, but it was. It would have seemed, because the one they had was dead. But knowing that there were things like that knocking about in the water didn't please us. Anyway, the next thing was we started to move up through Greece to and we got snow actually. In fact, we were up to our axles in snow for a while after we left Athens. We went. We went up through Lamia and on, and then to Larissa, and then further on north, and sort of got ourselves billeted in a little remote village. It was called Kolindros, and I was put in the top room in a house, which with 3 or 4 others, and when you went in, the bottom floor was all animals, and in fact you didn't start to come to human habitation until you were 3 floors up. In fact, it was the 3rd floor we were on, because I remember now that the family, the Greeks themselves, the family were actually in the top floor, so we didn't really encounter those. But this was the style of Kolindros, this remote place. Tall houses, 4 stories, but they're more or less connected by ladders. You could hardly call them staircases, and so forth. But Kolindros was. Now it was getting towards Easter, I remember, and the people of Kolindros were making what they told us was Peter pie. They had some dish that they made for Easter, and the odd thing about this was that they didn't do this in the houses. They had ovens outside the village, 3 or 4 of these big sort of rounded ovens, like kilns really, and they did the cooking for the whole village was done in these. Anyway, this is pretty mountainous country up there. Anyway, eventually we moved from Kolindros to right up in the northern part of Greece, near Florina, although we never actually saw Florina. I've been told it's a very beautiful little city, but I never actually saw it. We did see Veria, and the next thing was that we got news that the Germans, what was presumably expected all the time, had made the move and come down through Yugoslavia, and they were on the Yugoslavia-Greek border. And I remember that when we were being given this information by, I think it was one of the officers, and he said, "We're like rats in a trap now."
You never mentioned guns or any armaments. What regiment were you in?
The RASC.
Which is what?
Well, it was really transport. And we were...
Is that the Royal Army Service Corps?
Royal Army Service Corps, yes.
Which provides transport
yes.
facilities for the
and
army?
Of course, every one of us, we had our own rifle and everything. We were
You've been trained to use it, haven't you?
Oh yes, combatant troops. Mind you, when I was on the firing range, I don't think I even hit the target, let alone the bullseye. But anyway, we had these Lee Enfield 303s, which are heavy things to carry, and you'd have 50 rounds of ammunition on your ammunition belt. It was. And of course you'd have your gas mask and everything. You never went anywhere without all this equipment. In fact, way back in England, you weren't allowed to walk across the camp without all your equipment. That was a rule. Funny things had happened there. But anyway, we're in Greece now, and next thing, as I say, we were told of Jerry being only not far away. And then the retreat started, and we were carrying petrol. The section I was in, we were petrol carriers, and we'd unloaded petrol off lorries and put it in the ground and dug it up again and put it back in the lorries and taken it somewhere else. This had happened 2 or 3 times. I had a feeling, and I still think I'm right, that as these petrol cans were sort of shiny metal, sort of tin, but they reflected the sunlight. And I'm pretty sure that the German recce planes up above us would be able to see wherever we were moving petrol cans by the reflection. They would be flickering. I'm quite sure of that. Anyway, we moved again, moved to a place called Gravina, where we were in a sort of dried up riverbed. In the summer in Greece, I think there must be a few dried up riverbeds, because I remember seeing quite a few of these, and quite dry, and not a trickle of water showing, and yet the evidence that there's a great rush of water sometimes, as there must be. Anyway, at this place, we were down in this sort of gorge. I walked up the hill to have a look around, to be able to see if I could see anything. I could see the town in the distance, the town of Gravina itself. I could look down into the gorge and see all the army lorries, and next thing is that the German planes came over, went right into the sun, and then started dive bombing. And scared the living daylights out of me, and I don't think I was the only one that was like that. It was really quite a thing. And they seemed to have sirens on the wings. They seemed to make, as they came down, there was a bit like an organ. The sound of, the sound of a bit like an enormous church organ. And what was
the purpose of that, do you think?
Just to scare the life out of us. It couldn't have any military value, really, except to destroy morale. But I feel convinced that you got this sound, And others had said that they did put these things on some of the planes. These planes were actually the Stukas, U-87s, Ju-87s. They came down. Anyway, they didn't hit me, and didn't hit anywhere close to where I was. I was, and as far as I know, none of our company was hit at all.
You actually saw them dive?
Oh yes, I could see sometimes the planes were overtaking the bomb. You could see the bomb underneath the plane.
After it had so-called left the plane?
Yes, after the plane had released the bomb, you could see the plane, the plane gaining on the bomb, getting, and then they'd swoop away. They must have had a certain drill for the way they swooped off. But the plane would be going faster than the bomb. Anyway, and coming down pretty nearly vertical. It was, I think about the most frightening experience I've known. Anyway, when it was all over, we checked up. As far as I knew, nobody was hurt out of our lot. I don't know about the other lots that were there at all. Nobody. There was. Well, you couldn't really find out. The only thing I knew was that the headquarters wagon had been hit, and all the records destroyed for our company. See, and that's 312 company, and the HQ wagon was a smaller wagon than the others. It was only about 2-tonner, whereas the others were 5-tonners. But the next thing was we were pounding our way down through Greece. We went through through Meteori, which is a spectacular place. It's a great tourist attraction nowadays, where it's a town that it's up against precipices that are hundreds of feet, possibly 1,000 feet, nearly straight up, with monasteries on the top. There are 3 or 4 monasteries, and then this on the top of this great cliff up above this town. Anyway, we went through there. I remember being so, even with all that was going on, being so impressed with the sight of this place, because we just drove straight through. And then from then on, we were just sort of camping, stopping and camping wherever we got to, you know. And trying to keep ahead of the Germans. But and then this went on. We went right down through Greece, right through, across the Corinth Canal. That's an impressive sight, because it's soft rock, and the canal is cut in a dead straight line, straight through. But we carried on right down to the southern part of the Peloponnese, to a town called Kalamata. There's a bit of Greece that still goes on past Kalamata, but that's the last real settlement. And anyway, at Kalamata we were supposed to be getting taken off by the Navy. Well, the Navy never managed it. We were there for 3 or 4 days and nights, hiding up during the day and then going down to the beach at night, presumably to be taken off. I was still carrying this accordion with me. I got so tired of carrying the accordion, and I was rather more interested in getting on board a naval boat and getting taken off. In fact, somebody had said to me, "You'll never get that on. They'll not take that with you. You know, because we were thinking it'd be something like Dunkirk, you see." But anyway, I hid the accordion in among a pile of bushes, but I never saw it again. When I came for it again, it had disappeared. And the day after that, the Germans arrived, and we were told we were prisoners. And
what happened after that?
Well, we'd lost heart terribly, you know. That there seemed to be, I mean, well, it's when we were supposed to be in a war, and so and we would have, I think every one of us would have liked to have been advancing, instead of which all we'd done was retreat, and we retreated as far as it was possible to do so. And from there on, there was nothing else to do, really. Now an order was given out from the German High Command, or whatever it was, that if anybody escaped, they'd go round and shoot 1 in 10. Now nobody wanted that, but it was probably a bluff, this. But in any case, there was nowhere to retreat to. I mean, what would you do if you nowhere to, nowhere to escape to? What would you do if you escaped? You'd be caught up with before long, with the German army behind you and the Mediterranean in front of you. You hadn't really got a lot of choice. So anyway, they marched us up into a big field, a bit of an enclosure, rough. I think they'd made it a sort of enclosure of it quickly, and gave this order out, and then a day or so later put us on a train and took us through to Corinth. And we spent a few weeks in Corinth. We were put into a Greek army barracks, which consists of several big buildings and a lot of open space around. We were eating stuff that we could buy from the Greeks, bread and so forth. I'd finished up with about 6 tins of bully beef, which was very lucky. But I finished up sharing this with a little gang.
Did you have some good pals in your?
Well, the next thing was in Corinth. We formed a little concert party, and now my accordion had gone, but there was an accordion I could borrow, and the poor chap who was the owner of this accordion, I don't know how I came to know about it, but he was at the other side of the camp. I had about a quarter of a mile to walk to go to him, but he was quite happy about me borrowing his accordion, but he was too ill to play it, and I think he died later, but I never knew properly. There were an awful lot of things that you couldn't know about, really, so that when I got, so I was part of the orchestra. I think there was a trumpeter and a violinist and a conductor. And the conductor used to play the piano in the Coventry Hippodrome, which used to do concerts over the British radio. And the violinist was in the BBC Symphony Orchestra. He could play any damn thing on the fiddle. He's a marvellous fiddle player. Mind you, in the BBC, he was playing a viola. But with us, he played the violin. The violin's easier to carry around anyway. And I remember him very much, because we had a lot to do with one another as time went on. But there was one of the huts that had a sort of veranda in front, which we turned into a sort of stage, and we did these sort of concerts and tried to keep the lads happy, and until they moved us to Salonika. But in Salonika, in fact, on the journey to Salonika was a bit strange, because we had two trains. They took us on the Peloponnese Railway into Athens, changed onto the main line, and then took us to near Lamia, where the railway runs through a tunnel under the mountains, and but the railway had been blocked. Whether the British had blocked it or something, but anyway, the railway was destroyed from there on for about another 40 kilometres, and we walked that 40 kilometres over the top of a mountain pass, and then right down into the valley. So we went up to about 4,000 feet, I think, and then down again into the valley, and quite a long way. And with the Germans marching alongside of us, it was no more fun for them than it was for us, I don't think. But eventually, I'm put in another train. We got to Salonika, and in Salonika it wasn't all that good. And in fact, I went round and found one of the chaps who'd been very comedian and singer, really, who'd been in this concert party, and I said, "What about us trying to get something going again?" And he said he he didn't think we could do it. Anyway, we had no instruments anyway, because I don't know what had happened to the trumpeter and so forth. But Linda, this chap from the BBC turned up later on, but we never got anything going in Salonika, and eventually we finished up in Austria. We'd gone right up through Yugoslavia. Took us to a little town called Wolfsburg. Wolfsburg is this is not the Wolfsburg where they make the Volkswagen cars. This is it's in Austria, not far from the Yugoslav border, and this was what they called the Stalag, or Stammlager, to give it its full name. And from there, we were sent out onto working parties to go into a working camp.
What kind of work did you do?
Well, now the first one was on the railway, and it was jolly hard work. Everything you touch on the railway weighs a ton, and just the same in Austria as it does in Britain, really, for that matter. And we were sort of plate layers. The chief job, really, was this was a place called Solfeld, near Klagenfurt, and it was jolly hard work. We worked for 10.5 hours a day, and the chief thing you had, the chief tool, was like a pickaxe with a square end, and this was used for knocking the stones under the sleepers. And you stood on the sleeper, and you hammered the stones under the sleeper that you were standing on. And it was jolly hard work.
Did they feed you well, or not?
No, not very well. We didn't do very well at Solfeld. Anyway.
You didn't starve, though, did you?
No, we weren't starving. We'd been getting pretty short. We pretty nearly starving in Corinth, not Corinth, Salonika. That was the worst place, really. Wolfsburg wasn't so bad in a way. As long as you had a Dixie, everybody who was taken prisoner, they found themselves some kind of a tin that would hold soup, because 9 times out of 10, if there was anything being dished out, you had to have something to catch it in, and because lots of men they kept their army Dixies, and this is the way you did it. But in Salford, it wasn't all that good, and eventually I made out that I was ill, which I wasn't really, and went back and got sent back to Wolfsburg. And at Wolfsburg, which was the Stammlager, the sort of HQ, I found Lindo Southworth, a trumpet player, and a saxophone player, and 1 or 2 others, and we all formed together and formed a band, and then we formed a concert party. We had some terrific talent there, and I was in Wolfsburg for the next 12 months.
How did the Germans treat you generally?
Oh, not bad. The German soldiers were all right, to them, we were soldiers the same as they were, it was, the simplified thing that they would say is that, it's these politicians that make the wars. You and I, the poor buggers who have to fight them. That's the way they would put it. And
where did you go then after that?
Well, as I say, Wolfsburg, I was there, and I was very active with the concert party. I wrote a musical comedy, which I wasn't the only one that had done this, but and wrote and we had it performed. We'd actually had permission. We had a piano, a very good piano, and we had permission to make an orchestra. We practically built a theatre, and because there was a lot of men in this camp. And we had and some of the things that were put on. Apart from the show I'd done, somebody else had done a thing that was like Showboat and so on. We'd done a pantomime and all that. We had a choir, and they were singing quite some stuff. The orchestra, we were doing concerts and that.
Where did you get your instruments from?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but we managed to get. The Germans were quite good about this sort of thing. They're not Philistines like the English are, They think that music's a good thing, And we had, and they even supplied us with music. We did Strauss waltzes. The orchestra was being led by Lindo Southworth on this fiddle and conducting, and so we did the ballet music from Faust. We did all these, quite a lot of things. We did, I remember doing the Die Fledermaus overture, and that takes a bit of doing when you've got a very ill-balanced sort of group. There were times when I was on the accordion. They'd supplied us with an accordion, and I was playing flute and trombone on the accordion, the parts, you see, and so on. And this we did. Now, an interesting thing that happened there was that there were a lot of Australians with us, and we got on. Jolly good. In fact, I messed with a couple of Australians for quite a while. We shared we put our grub together. So we were getting Red Cross parcels by that time, that helped a lot. But
You get any letters from home?
oh yes, we started to, and we could write. Oh, the thing is they were censored, but we did get letters. But one of the odd things was when it was the autumn again. By the time I got back to Wolfsburg and started all that, all these got mixed up with this concert party and so on. And then the snow started to come. Well, some of the Australians had never seen snow in their lives. These were grown men who'd never seen snow. And we saw it on the mountaintops and coming a bit lower and lower. And next thing is we were up to our ankles in it in the prison camp. And the Australians went mad, throwing snowballs at one another. And they'd never handled snow. So that lasted for a bit. But I can remember, just to give an idea of the atmosphere there in Wolfsburg, the camp sort of sergeant major, the Feldwebel.
Was he a German then?
A German, yes. The man who was in charge, his name was Schultz, and he was quite popular. He was quite a decent chap. And he had us all on parade one morning. This was the regular thing, you see. We had to be lined up and counted. And this morning, there we all are. And the snow was only just come. And the Australians are throwing snowballs. The snowballs flying through the air in all directions. And Schultz, Sergeant Major Schultz, is standing up there. And the snowball hits him on the chest. And everybody's laughing, including him. And he takes his revolver out of his holster. And he holds the revolver like this, as though the next one that throws the snowball, will get shot, you see. And it was as a joke. It was a joke. It was the.
He had a sense of humour.
There was such an understanding between us that he could do that, and we could respond. Yes, and very funny. Yes.
Did you stay at that camp for the rest of the war, for the remaining of the war?
No. After a while, we kept hearing by hidden radio and so forth that the Allies had driven the Germans out of the desert and were coming up through the leg of Italy. And we imagined that they'd be through the leg of Italy in about a week. Actually, we were wrong by about 2 years. But I felt I wanted to go away from Wolfsburg, and I wanted to go down to Klagenfurt, which is close to the Italian border. And I thought, quite mistakenly, that the British would be soon over that border. You see, it didn't happen. Actually, Italy surrendered. And to the Allies, as an administration, it surrendered. But before, and I thought, well, the Allies will be up on the borders of Austria in no time. Well, of course, they were not, because the Germans took over, and the Germans went down through Italy, and it was a terrible campaign, that, because it had Monte Cassino and all that sort of thing, But I decided I wanted to go to Klagenfurt, and I'd heard Klagenfurt was a working camp, and it had been set up, I think, really, because they were putting a little stream into a culvert, and this was the job that they'd got the prisoners to do in the first place. But by the time I was there, they had men going out on all sorts of jobs. In fact, you lined up in the morning and you could almost pick where you wanted to go according to the men who were already in the job, you see. Some of them had got a job that they wanted to stick to. So they didn't want newcomers coming in or so forth. Anyway, there was a bit of that sort of thing going on. But so I sort of freelanced and went to different jobs. Some of the jobs were hard, and some of them not so hard.
What kind of jobs were there?
Well, there were jobs in warehouses, carrying stuff about and loading wagons and unloading them and so on. And there were 2 or 3 jobs like that. There were some jobs that were just simply digging a trench in the road for electric cable or something like that. That was a fairly common sort of job to have to do. Some of them as I say, some of them you work very hard. On one occasion I did get, I found myself working in the coal stores, where the hard part of that was you had to carry some pretty heavy lumps of meat. But there was a spin-off from that you took a bag with you, and they'd got this organised very well, really, that while we were doing the work, there were a couple of lads who seemed to know what they were doing, who were cutting slices of meat and filling up these bags. And this was in midwinter, by the way, and in fact it wasn't any colder inside the coal stores than it was outside. I remember that quite distinctly. But an odd thing happened on the way back. You see, I was new to this job. In fact, it was the only time I ever went on it. And when we got out to the gate of the prison camp, we were halted. And I thought, oh, now, I wonder what's going to happen now, because I had some of these pieces of meat in my bag. And anyway, as I say, we were halted, told to open our bags, and then as we went through the gate, the guards took a couple of pieces out of everybody's bag and left the rest. And we rather think that the guards had a good feed that night. They think that this had probably been going on all the time, but I, as I say, I didn't know about it. The hardest job was, and yet it was a job I liked, was shoveling coal out of the coal wagons at the engine sheds. This you shoveled, 2 men had a 20-ton pile of coal in a wagon to shovel out between them. The secret of it was to throw the first lot as far away as you could, because as it went on, you were throwing onto a higher pile of coal, and so if you started throwing it too close to the wagon, you had a very difficult job at the end. But it was by the engine sheds, and as I say, the sight of these locomotives shunting up and down, in and out all the time, was quite interesting. They were a bit primitive in the system of coaling them. But anyway, that was, as I say, quite a job. But this went on anyway, and now it all went on for quite some time, until there was one winter day. I can't remember all I can remember is it was it was in the late part of the winter, and it was cold but brilliant sunshine, which was typical of the kind of weather we used to get in the winter. And we saw a line of planes come over the Caravancan Mountains, high up above us, and then heard a noise like about 10 express trains all rushing at us at once, and down came the bombs. And that was our first taste of being bombed. They landed the bombs on the town, missed the prison camp. And from then on, we were all the time aware that that could happen any time, and it did happen quite a lot. Sometimes we were in town and it was bombed. It was they were fortresses mainly that were coming over.
Were they daylight bombing?
This was daylight bombing, yes. We had very little night bombing altogether, but this daylight bombing, and you'd see these planes so high in the sky that it was the sun glinting on them that you really saw. And their system, these were the Americans, of course. They were letting all the bombs go at once, and this led to a lot of argument among us about our attitudes towards war and the Germans and so forth. Some of us had come to realise, and I think most had, that the ordinary Austrian people that we were working with and so forth were not our enemies, really, but and we had very mixed feelings about seeing Klagenfurt being bombed, even though we were there as prisoners, to see a beautiful town actually, but going up in smoke. And they did bomb it. It got really badly knocked about before the end of the war. One of the main roads, the Bahnhofstrasse, the road that led down to the station, which had fine buildings down each side and trees down, eventually became just a footpath between mounds of rubble.
There must have been a lot of people killed then.
There must have been a lot. We never knew properly. Now, we always thought that we were all right because we were on the edge of the town. In fact, there was nothing but fields beyond our camp. And we were on the edge of the town, and we knew there were wrecking planes coming over every now and then. And we always said to ourselves, well, they know we're here. They know it's a prison camp. They can see it's a prison camp, and so on. And then, but now, not far away, there were some tunnels made in there was some little hills not far away from us, and we were allowed. We went with guards, of course. We never went anywhere without a guard. But the guards would go with us down to these hills, and we'd go into these tunnels.
When there was an air raid?
When there was an air raid. We have to when the air raids, when the siren went. The siren went the same way as it does in England, And when the siren went, this would happen. Now, you had a choice of staying in the camp or going down to these tunnels. And now, after a while, we didn't like being inside the tunnel. In fact, the air was terrible, because you get a lot of people. Because we were mixed up with the civilians, the ordinary people at Klagenfurt in there. But we got to the point where we would stand around outside and actually watch what was going on. And sometimes it was pretty spectacular, But this was right away from the town centre. As I say, it was in the open country, this part. Now, on this day, I decided I wasn't going to go down to the tunnels. The sirens went, and I stayed in the camp. And there was a lot of raiding going on. There were planes going over, and so on. And then one small group of planes, I could see these quite clearly, up in the sky. And there were about 7 of them. And they were coming over. And I was with a chap sharing a roommate. He'd stayed in the camp the same as I had. And we looked up and we saw something like tinsel appear alongside the planes and so forth. And he said to me, "What's that?" And I said, "I think it's bombs." And, you know, I think I'm one of the very few people who've ever seen a stick of bombs end on. I got an end on view, because as the bombs, we were looking straight up at them. They were coming towards us. They were not moving. You know, they were not moving across the sky. They were just coming down straight. And we went into the hut. We didn't know what to do. We lay down on the floor in the hut. And the camp was bombed. We were all right. There were 7 men in that camp that were killed that day. We tried to dig one of them out. By the time we got him out from the wreckage of the hut, he'd been in. He was dead anyway. From then onwards, none of us stayed in the camp during an air raid. But it was this chap and I, we were lucky. We were lucky because